I think we are now ready. Go ahead, Muskan.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to another enriching session of the ICS Wednesday seminar. My name is Muskan Punia, and I'm a research intern at the ICS. I have the honor of serving as the master of ceremony for today's event. I extend a heartfelt welcome to each and every one of you who has joined us. The title for today's seminar is Beyond Borders, Chinese Demographic Chessboard and Implications for Global Diplomacy. Demography is a crucial element in understanding a state's behavior at home and abroad. China's one-child policy and the radical shift it brought to demography presented it with new challenges. China has to come up with new ways of dealing with these unique problems that have and will continue to have far-reaching implications for its domestic, socio-political, and economic stability, as well as its international and domestic policies. It is this complex interaction between China's demographic dynamics, domestic policy, and international diplomacy that the session will explore. The speaker for today's seminar is Dr. Sachi Agnihotri, who is an assistant professor at the MIT University, Noida. Her research interests include Indian and world history, demography, and cultural issues with an interdisciplinary approach. Her latest work includes an edited book titled Women's Identity and Representation in History and Literature, along with another forthcoming edited book titled Dynamics of World Politics in 21st Century Asia. Today's chair for the session is Dr. Partha Mukhopadhyay, who is a senior fellow at the Center for Policy Research. He is also an honorary fellow at the ICS. His research interests are urbanization, infrastructure, and the development paths of India and China. He has published extensively and writes frequently for the national media. He was chair of the Working Group on Migration, Government of India, member of the High-Level Railway Restructuring Committee, Ministry of Railways, and the Technical Advisory Committee of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation. He was chosen as one of the inaugural fellows of India-China Institute, New School, New York. And in 2016, he was selected for a residency at the Bellagio Center for Rockefeller Foundation. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like to ask all the participants to follow some housekeeping rules. All participants will be muted during the presentation. Questions can be posted in the chat box during the event, or you can raise your hand during the interactive session. And after the presentation, you will be called upon to unmute yourself and ask questions. We request you to mention your name and affiliation while you raise your questions. That's all. I now hand over the floor to Dr. Partha Mukhopadhyay to take the proceedings forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Muskan, and welcome everybody to this workshop, which is a fascinating topic. We usually tend to think of demographics largely in terms of economic development and social change. But today, Dr. Agnihotri will walk us through the implications of these demographic changes on international relations. And that promises to be a very interesting take on how these two large sort of phenomena are connected. So I see that Dr. Agnihotri is a short presentation, and which is already there. And I think it's best that we allow her to present the full argument. Please take your time doing so, and then engage with her on what promises to be a very interesting discussion going forward. So the floor is yours. About, shall we say, 40 minutes? Would that be good for you, Dr. Agnihotri?
Yes, sir.
Very well. The floor is all yours, or rather the screen is all yours.
Thank you, sir. Very good afternoon to everyone. I'm very grateful to ICS for providing me this platform to share my views And as mentioned earlier, that today I will be talking about the role of demography in China's domestic and foreign policy as well. Because when we are going to talk about the global implication, we cannot understand it if we are not getting what is really happening inside the China. So this is how I will try to discuss the impact of demographic factors on China's domestic policy and as well as foreign policy. So if I mention about my topic again, that would be beyond border Chinese demographic chessboard and its implication for global diplomacy. So in this journey, I tried to follow these four pillars. First, I will try to discuss very briefly the some of the concepts related to, of course, demographic, that why demography is very important and what are the evidences we are having. Then we will discuss some of the implication, of course, because of course we have discussed a lot about what really this one child policy has done and how economy is taking a different turn in China. But we need to discuss it. We need to throw some light on these aspects again in order to have a holistic discussion. And then I will try to have a very brief discussion on some of the recent development as and use it as an example. And of course, at last, I will try to leave some points to ponder over, to think over whether we should discuss these points in future as well, or we should include these points in our policy crunching and all that. So this will be the brief roadmap that I would like to follow during my presentation. So without any further delay, let me start my presentation. So the very first thing, of course, this whole presentation, the basis of this whole presentation, it talks about demography. So why demography? Because it is very interesting, and many people can think amid these recent tensions, global tensions and crises like Russia, Ukraine, and the most recent and unfortunate Israel, Palestine, is it really important to know about and understand these demographic factors? So the answer is yes, we do need to understand this aspect. Why? Because demography plays a very crucial role in policy making by providing essential insight into the population size, composition, dynamics related to it, and policymakers really rely on demographic data to make a very informed decisions related to different policy matters like healthcare, education, social services, and of course, foreign policy as well. It helps in identifying the emerging trend, addressing some of the demographic challenges as well, and also it also helps in allocating the resources very effectively. So yes, this is why we really need demography whenever we are going to talk about the policy aspect of any country. Now, let's discuss, is there any role of demography in China's policy making? So, if we are trying to find answer of this question, so yes, it it is playing very crucial role. How and why? Because China is a one very unique example of forced population policy and forced demographic change. Of course, we cannot change, we cannot stop the demographic destiny of it, the demographic transition. But the point is that here in Chinese case, it is forced one, it is not the natural one. So China's unprecedented and forced population policy, which lasted for around 4 decades, it really had, and it is having very deep impact on its domestic and in some way its international politics as well. How? Because it is very important to consider demographic policy if we are trying to understand the long-term perspective of a country. Okay, what will be the long-term policy preferences of that country? If we try to understand that, of course, we need to talk about the demographic trend of that country. In a similar way, if we talk about China, in today's China, demographic data is being used by their policymaker at a very significant level for the establishment and development of domestic policy. Using these demographic data, these allow the Chinese policymaker to understand the social economic dynamics, and in a way they are also contributing in political dynamics, like how to maintain the stability, the domestic stability in China. So, by considering these demographic data and cross-checking these multiple types of demographic transition, demographic database, these are the considerable evidences that these are pointing towards what can be seen as a weakness of China as well. Because like in my further slides, I will discuss about the difference between the green economy and the silver economy. Of course, all the scholars, they already know, but for our young scholars, I would like to explain it again. So this is what I'm saying. If we are studying demography very closely, we are not only getting the idea of strength of that country, but it is also giving us idea about the weakness, possible weakness of that country. And this is how demographic study of that particular country is not only beneficial for the policymaker of that particular country, but for the other countries as well. As a outsider, as a neighboring country, or as a diplomatic partner, or maybe rival as well, if I am keeping an eye on these kind of trends, it will give me a very clear idea about the future of that country, at least a very clear idea, if not the exact idea. So this is why demography is very important when we are going to talk about these things. And now, if I talk about that whether demography is very important in foreign policy as well, yes, I will start with a very small and very easy example. The simple point is that when we talk about a nation's economy or military, number matters. When we talk about young population, the pool of young generation, of course, it is an asset for the labor population or the working population and the military strength of that country as well. But at the same time, when that pool is drying up, that will pose a different kind of impact on that country, and that country will also try to tackle that situation. And this is how demography indirectly but very deeply influence the domestic and the international policy as well. And other domestic factor, if we talk about the migration, impact on trade, resource allocation, market dynamics, these are also some of the points which not only affect the internal or domestic dynamic, but the international relation dynamics also. I'm not saying it is posing the 100% very concrete impact, or this is the policy maker, but it is one of the very crucial point that must be considered when we are talking about these policies. So this is how, yes, the role of demography in Chinese policy making is very much there. There is no doubt about it. So, um, to understand this impact, now let's talk about the Chinese demographic chessboard. The word, why I use this word chessboard, because when we talk about the demographic transition or the demographic trend, especially in China, it is full of ups and downs. And still today also, when we are talking in, in recent time also, it is changing very dramatically. So this is why I use this term. And when I'm going to give very basic information to all our newly background listeners as well. If we talk about the demographic trend, we all know that China in 1980s, China had a very different, unique kind of population policy, that is one-child policy, and that really shaped the demographic destiny of China. And this is how we can see China very dramatically controlled its population. But what are the recent trends? If you see this, the first graph, if you see the graph, and please focus on the year 2020 and 2022, you will see a sharp decline in this year. So 2022 is the time when the very first time, roughly, if I'm not wrong, in around 6 decades, this was the first decline in population. And that is the year, 2022 was the year when China noticed the lowest fertility rate as well. And now this was the huge cause of concern. The point is that Chinese demographer, they were focusing on this point, but government in a way using its propaganda and different thing, and of course for policy reasons as well, government was delaying these kind of conclusions. You know, it's okay kind of thing. But now 2022, you cannot ignore this thing. And if you see the decline in population growth, 2022 is also a time when population growth showed the negative growth, minus 0.60%. This was the negative population growth. And another alarming trend was that birth rate was declining. On the other side, death rate was increasing. Birth rate in 2021 was around 7.52, and that declined to 6.77 in 2022, if you see the second graph. And in the same graph, you will see that death rate has increased from 7.18% in 2021 to 7.37%. Yes, you might say this is very nominal difference, but when we are talking about demography and when we are having a base of like China, even the slightest difference can pose a very important impact. Now, when I have given you a very basic understanding of Chinese demography, now let's talk about this term green to silver population. This term is very much clear when we are talking about green population. Simply, we are talking about the population dividend. And when we are talking about the silver population, we are talking about the elderly population portion. So when we are talking, when we are discussing that China is in a transition from green economy to silver economy, that can be reflected in this pyramid as well. If you see 1980, I have given I have used this 1980 because that is the time when this unique policy was introduced. So if you see, the base is very broad, right? Base is broad. That means the young population is having the greater say in the composition. And if you see the upper side, that is narrow. That means we are having less elderly population. But if you see the 2010 pyramid and then compare it with 20, you will see that base is shrinking like this. And the above, the top is getting broader. That means now we are having lesser younger population and we are having more and more elderly population. Here I would like to drag your attention. You see in the pyramid of 2000, you will see in middle there is a, the broad section that is reflecting the working population, जिसको कहा जाता था the very famous one that China is having the demographic dividend, the miracle of China, the manufacturing hub of China, all these, dedicated to this large pool of working population. And here are some projections for 2030 and 2040 as well. These are United Nations data. And if you see, of course, you can have projection till 2100 as well. The point is that what I'm trying to make here, that you will see with each decade, the base is shrinking and the number of elderly population is increasing. That is the simple indication that your economy is turning into a silver economy or silver society. What factor you are dealing, you can add that thing, silver society or silver economy. Yeah, in previous slide I have used United Nations data. I thought I should also use some Chinese data as well, because if we talk about the country-wise data, of course UN data is based on projections. So let's talk about the Chinese data as well. These data are from National Bureau of Statistics in China. So this is the latest one. If you see the first graph, please see there are three bars. The green one, that is reflecting the working population. The pink one, that is reflecting the adolescents, that means 0 to 14 year, the child. And the gray one is, of course, the elderly population. Now, the alarming point is from 2015 and especially 20 as well. If you see both green and pink bar, that means the working population and the age group from 0 to 14, both are shrinking. On the other side, which bar is increasing? That is elderly. That means this, even so, what my point is, that it is whether you use United Nations data or you use this country's data, that means the data from Chinese census, both are indicating towards one thing. Of course, intensity is different, but they are indicating towards the same phenomena. I have given the another data of total dependency rate. This is also very alarming. If you see, this is the total dependency rate. This is pretty evident that total dependency rate means it is the how total dependency rate is calculated. Basically, it is child dependency rate plus old age dependency rate on the working population. Okay? So when, if you see this pink one or this orange one, this is the child dependency rate, and the blue one is elderly dependency rate. Clearly, you can see the drastic shift in share. Of course, dependency is a burden on working class. But when we are talking that elderly dependency or old age dependency is increasing, that means it is not productive. Even if when we are saying that we are having increased child dependency, at least in future that pool will convert into working population. But when we are seeing that old age dependency is increasing, that means it is going to push the resources as well. It is going to create burden on the resources. So both of the data, this is what I am trying to tell, that both of the data is saying that yes, demographic destiny is the reality and we cannot ignore it. So now I hope that I made this point clear. What is the basic structure of Chinese demography? And now let's try to understand what are the implication of these changes or these demographic trend. I try to make it as easy as I could. So when we talk about the domestic policy, I have mentioned this from green to silver China as well, so that this is a very easy term to remember and it tells a lot about that thing. So the point is that when we talk about the implication, the demographic, how demographic destiny is affecting the domestic policy, of course, we can have multiple factor. We can define it the way we want to define. Like I have defined it into economic challenges, social challenges, rural to urban migration, retirement dilemma, and social political policy reshaping of in China that is going on in China as well. So if you try to understand, all these are coming in under the umbrella of socio-economic and political policy making, and which is the ingredient of domestic policy of any country. So when we talk about these implication, so of course, China's rapid transition from green to silver economy due to its complex demographic challenge is really it is very certain that it is having a far-reaching implication for Chinese domestic socio-political and economic stability as well. And if we talk about this economic or social challenge, of course, like in previous slide, I have explained this thing, that working population is shrinking and aging is now spreading, and of course it is creating pressure on China's economy as well. We have seen recently China's economic slowdown. Of course other factors are also there, but we cannot ignore the demographic factor as well. In a similar way, if we try to understand what kind of social challenge, or of course it is partially economic challenge as well, and how China is trying to find answers to these problems and issues, we can see the social welfare, healthcare, pension fund. These are some of the points, and I'm very sure when you are listening some news, when you are reading some articles, these are some of the very crucial points which are being discussed again and again. So China's rapid aging population has led to increased healthcare cost and growing need for elderly care. Of course, it is altogether a very different topic to be discussed, the elderly care, the long-term care. But when we are trying to understand only the domestic policy per se, so this demographic shift has influenced the Chinese government to prioritize its healthcare reforms, increase increase in healthcare funding, spending, and implementation of policy which are going to support elderlies and pensioners. And of course, these changes are going to affect the domestic policy of China. And all these things are not only related to economic activities, it is in a long run, it is all related to the political stability as well. In a similar way, if another aspect of this point we try to understand rural to urban migration, of course, I have not shown the data here, but if you see the rural urban migration data of China, you will see that urbanization, of course, it is a well-known phenomena as well, that urbanization is increasing very rapidly. The point is that in rural area, when there are mostly elderly people who are going to contribute in pension funds, because again, pension fund in China is another topic to be discussed. But if we talk about pension fund system in China, of course, it has revised many time in 90s, also in 86 also it was revised, and then in 90s as well, then recent as well. The point is that it is based on the contribution. The point is that when in rural area there are fewer people to contribute, that means the pension fund that is decreasing or shrinking. That means China need to work on that, and of course China is working on that. It has worked on it as well, that China has focused on the national pension fund. That means why this need occurred, because now there are some sectors, some areas, not sectors, sorry, some areas, for example rural area, where there are not much contribution but there is liability. It's a simple, very easy maths to understand. You are having less income but you are having more expenditure, so of course you need someone to help you. So this is how this national pool came into the focus, and this is how, so this is the dynamics behind the whole pension system, the revisions that we study. But this is the basic dynamics why it all occurred. So the point is that if we talk about migration, migrations are at two levels. The point is that internal migration and international migration as well. So international we will discuss in foreign policy section, but if we talk about internal migration, of course, this is migration is the reason why we see the urbanization, the increased urbanization. And when we are talking about these kind of system, these kind of population shift, of course, it needs a complete revamp and restructuring of the welfare policies as well. So, of course, this is how the one example that I tried to give, that this shrinking population fund. For example, I will like to drag your attention here that combined revenues of China's pension fund, it declined by 13.3% in recent year, but expenditure increased by 5.5%. And this is causing the pension system is going to record the first ever annual deficit in China in 2020. I am sure many of you must have read the news about it. So what is this one line or this one data has the years of demographic transition, and then we saw the result. In a simple way, in I think in China Academy of Social Science in 2019, there was one report, and they also discussed this point that they had this prediction that by 2035, this pension fund will dry up. That means now we need, of course, it's pretty obvious we are having lesser working people, we are having more elderly people. That means there are less contributor and more people to take those pension things. So this is the one this is another example of this first annual deficit that occurred in 2020. Related to this, another policy shift, this is still in debate in China, that is retirement age dilemma. If we talk about the Chinese retirement age, that is pretty low in comparison to other country. Now, for males, it's 60 years. For females, it's very 50 years to 55 years. I think 50 years for blue collar job and 55 year is for white collar job. So if you see, it is, very, this is called early retirement kind of thing. So the point is that now government is thinking about this thing, we will we will enhance the retirement age, because there was estimate that by 2040 China will have 402 million people who will be above 60 years. So the simple point is that if your retirement age is 60, you are having more and more retirees. And this trend means that the demographic pool that China is enjoying, that is vanishing. One example I would like to give here, of course, is still at national level, it is still being discussed, but as we see the example of China, China is having very unique tendency of having this pilot projects introduced in the provinces and municipalities and all that. So following that pattern, if you see, Jiangsu is the first one that introduced a kind of partial delaying in retirement, and of course it was followed by Shanghai and other provinces are also trying to follow this thing. So the very first thing that Jiangsu did, that it proposed that yes, the retiree, they can delay their retirement for 1 or more year, and this is all. And if you see at central level discussion as well, this 5-year plan, I think 14th 5-year plan, 2021 to 26. This is one of the main point that they are trying to discuss. We will increase the retirement age. Why I have used this dilemma, because it has not 100% implemented at national level. If you see, if you follow this news, you will find at province level, at municipality level, it is being introduced slowly. Now, if we talk about the social political policy reshape, of course, it's all about the policy reshaping and readjustment. Otherwise, you will vanish from this race of globalization, economy, and power race as well. So yes, the very important implication that we see, that is the reversal of one child policy. Here we should not say it one child policy. Basically, we should call reversal of family planning policy, because if you see that this reversal has been done at two levels. In 2015, finally government said, I will withdraw the one child policy, and couples, they were allowed to have 2 kids. And formally it was introduced in 2016, but 2015 they announced it. And then again in very recently in 2021, they even allowed 3 children. So this reversal of policy was the need of China. Why? Because according to Chinese Health Authority data, around 40, and we cannot say it is totally useless. Of course, one of the biggest criticism against this reversal is that it is too late, and it is a very late realization. So government is late in this term, but we cannot say it is 100% useless. Of course, we do have some benefits, some positive developments as well. If we consider the data from the Chinese Health Authority, around 40% birth in China in 2022, they were second birth. That means, yes, reversal is in a way it is working. And even 15% birth of 2022, those were the third birth. So yes, it is in a way working, but the kind of drastic shift we see in population trend in China, it is not going to be that much effective. And of course, when we talk about the policy reshape and all that, recently we see that China is focusing a lot of innovation studies, research and development in a very light mood. We used to say China is master of copy paste, but now China is working on innovation as well. So why this need occur? Because China understand that China is not going to remain the manufacturing hub. In that way, we can see Southeast Asian country like Vietnam, Bangladesh, even India. They are overpowering China in terms of being cheap labor, manufacturing hub, and all those things. So, what can make you above all them? Your better innovation, your better research, your knowledge. So, this is why if you see the research pattern, the education policy changes, halaki these are not very much, in focus kind of thing, but if you see, they are focusing on research, innovation, and these kind of projects. And in fact, yeah, this is all. Acha, now let's talk about the implication of foreign and global diplomacy. Of course, this is very tricky one, and I'm again repeating, I'm not saying that it is 100% going to affect, but of course, it's not like that it has no role in foreign policy or global diplomacy. The very prominent one is the impact on military modernization. We are having a lot of, we are these days, not these days, I think past 2-3 years, the Chinese budget has been top of the, it has been top of the town. We are following the military budget, the kind of budget. Why we are following this? Because this military modernization, and military modernization doesn't mean that China is having some primitive military and they are going to modernize it. No, the point is that now they are focusing from quantity to quality. The reason is very obvious. They understand the leadership, they understand that we will be an old country. So how your military pool will be full when you will have a very modernized system. That means the introduction of technology, and this is why we are listening a lot about these kind of military modernization in China. The point is that the size of army is not the only factor of military strength. Its military capability, other factors like training, technology, tactics, these are some of the very important and significant aspect of of an army. And here when we talk about PLA, People's Liberation Army, and when we talk about President Xi Jinping, of course, we have seen that he has emerged as a very strong, radical kind of leader. And of course, he has given a timeline to the country, the timeline of 2035, that by 2035, we will have a by 2035, China has to complete the defense and military modernization. And by mid of the century, they are going to achieve the goal of world-class military. So why all these things are happening? This is what I'm trying to focus. Of course, we all are talking about these military modernization. We are having very deeper research as well, but this is one of the very crucial point that we should not miss, and it is often overlooked. I'm not saying that people are not mentioning this point, but this point is not being this point is not getting the kind of attention it should be getting. And if you see this modernization, even China's PLA is also having a strategic support force as well. And this strategic support force, or SSF, if we call it, they are also having the space system department. So this is leading the military's space operation as well. So all these level of military expenditure, the kind of military modernization, this is the part of China's foreign policy and global diplomacy. And of course, one of the very important factor is this demographic shift. If we talk about the current priorities of Chinese government, they have attached this military modernization with their 14th five-year plan, and they are focusing a lot, and they are also focusing on enhancing the arm industrial base, that we are going to be, means the Chinese are going to be self-sufficient, military technology should be advanced, and they are also working on the introduction and application of artificial intelligence in military. All these points are very, very crucial when we talk about China's foreign policy and global policy. The next point that we often discuss, that is Belt and Road Initiative. What is the reason behind this Belt and Road Initiative? Does it have is it related to this demographic reality or something like that? So yes, partially it is related to demographic realities, because China is now entering in a phase where it is having the quest for market and resources in near future. So the very main aspect through which China is trying to resolve this issue, it is rebuilding or revitalizing the Silk Road, that is called Belt and Road Initiative. And it is trying to reach out other countries. It is enhancing the investment, the other kind of activities such as infrastructure development, giving out the loans to the developing country. And this is how they are trying to create a future, a future of Chinese growth and development. So China's BRI or Belt and Road Initiative is a very good example of how China is leveraging its demographic and economic strategies for the global influence as well. China is investing in a manufacturing projects in a country across Asia, Africa, and even Europe as well. And they are aiming to create economic dependencies. Now, they are trying that these continents, these areas, in a long run, they should be dependent on China, and this is how China will gain it. So we cannot say that China is not aware, China is not working for to fighting this demographic challenges and all that. By providing this funding for this major infrastructure projects, China can gain political influence and access to the critical resources of these areas as well. We have a very good example of Africa itself. Now, the third one is the low manufacturer to skilled labor. We all have discussed, this is very obvious point, that China, once in a time, China had this population pool. China became the manufacturer hub. China became the source of cheap labor, the center of cheap labor. But as China's population, working population is shrinking, of course, new players have come up, as I have mentioned, like Vietnam, Bangladesh, even India as well. So now how China is going to compete? The point is that you can replace your cheap labor from your skilled labor. So now China is focusing on that as well. In fact, if we follow the speeches of President Xi as well, President Xi is very much determined to achieve the technological self-reliance workforce, and he is hoping that innovation will improve China's labor productivity. And this is how they are trying to face any potential future labor shortage. So the whole dynamic is trying to talk about why we are suddenly we are in need of skilled labor, because we know that in future we are going to face the labor shortage, and how that gap can be filled. Of course, when we talk about, this is very clear cut economy, when we talk about skilled versus unskilled labor, of course skilled labor is here. So when I do not have number, I will have quality. And this is we can see directly or indirectly in President Xi's policy documents as well. And in fact, if you try to attach it with the education as well, the kind of education policy restructuring, as I discussed in previous slide as well, they are focusing a lot on research and development, and they are trying to focus and foster the innovation. They are trying to create a new pool of skilled and sophisticated workforce, which is going to replace that unskilled work. And of course, that will be much more valuable. So these are some of the very basic points when we try to understand how these demographic dynamics, they are even affecting our global policies and our foreign policy as well. And we are just sometimes we miss it, sometimes we ignore it. We feel ki maybe political tussle, political ideologies are having bigger role to play. But no, these are some of the very important points. And in fact, I have not mentioned it here in this slide. I have mentioned in this slide the China's perspective. But if you see the other countries' perspective as well, if I'm a rival country or neighboring country or whatever you call to China, and if I'm focusing the pattern, the kind of development China is doing, and if I understand the reason behind it, I will understand the weakness and strength of this country. And I will be in a better position to predict the policy preferences of China in future as well. So this is how, if we pay a little attention on demographic factors, demographic transition, demographic destiny can tell a lot to us. And it can be very helpful factor in deciding our foreign policy and our response to foreign policy. The kind of new international jargons, international events are occurring, which this one factor will be helpful to understand it in a better way. So now I will leave these 3 points with you all to have a thought on it. Okay, what can be the future policy? Maybe after 10 years, when we will be discussing these new political trend, new political crisis, maybe we are going to focus on these 3 things as well. Maybe we will find the mentions of these 3 things as well. Of course, future is all about technology, and it is a very clear cut example. And it's not like that technology is improving. Try to understand the need of it. The country like China, yes, we Indians, we are young, but very soon we will also be an aging country. Of course, aging has started in India. So when number is not the game, that means quality is the game. And when we are talking about the policy making, especially foreign policy making, the responses to the foreign policy, the international events, these kind of sophisticated technology, the sophisticated power, these are going to matter. This will be the point. A very small example is, of course, it's a vague example, but why China and America is so much against each other in the race of this technology, this 5G, whatever happened 2 3 years back, it was the years back, it was the hot topic. It was not like that someone is just trying to become number one. Why? Because they also understand, if I miss this chance, I might get behind 10 years or a decade. So this is the point, that maybe in future, when we will be discussing foreign policy, when we will be discussing the international issue, we will see more and more focus on technology and AI. And it will not be limited to the economy or education only. You will see it at military level as well. Of course, we have started seeing this in recent years itself. In future, we will see the more sophisticated and broader usage of these technologies. The second point that we will discuss in future, and we will see, and of course, all these points are, you will see the seeding right now itself. you will see a brief discussion about these points. The quest for market and resource. This will deepen its impact on the international relation and policy. Because now when I understand that I need market and resources, my international relation, my perspective towards the potential partner will change. And it is a very basic, from the ancient time we have this understanding, but now in modern time it will be revised and we will see this new kind of trend. And of course we are seeing it as well. And the third point which I would like to mention, migration diplomacy, or we can say the labor diplomacy. We have the example of Japan as well, that now Japan is trying to have this kind of labor migration and these kind of things. So when we in future, when we are having more and more aging countries, whether this migration diplomacy is going to be a crucial aspect of international diplomacy, we can think about this, because it might play a very good role in deciding the bilateral relation and the regional dynamics as well. So these are some of the possible future trends, some food for thought. And what I would like to, how I would like to conclude what is my argument here, Yafe, what I would like you to remember, that it is really very crucial to understand the demographic destiny of a country if we try to decipher its long-term policy preferences. Demography is not only very much, not only important for the domestic policy formation, but it is also having a good influence on international policy as well. With this argument, I will close my presentation, and I would like to have your suggestions, your kind comments and questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Ogniyatri. Quite a we've not only looked at the international issues, but also substantially on the domestic issues. Let me begin by asking for questions from the audience. Muskan, do you have anything in the chat box?
No, sir, not yet.
Okay. So, and no raised hands either at the moment. So let me begin then by asking you to sort of have a few questions, but let me begin by, I'll wait for the audience to sort of think through the presentation as you finish. But ask you to talk a little bit about the issue of gender.
Yes.
And the fact that over the last 10 years, there seems to have been a substantial, in fact, almost halving of the marriage rate and also the marriage, sort of number of marriages in China. Sort of from a peak in 2013 is now down to almost like from 14 million to 7 million or thereabouts. So, and given the fact that most births in India, in China are within marriage, so you don't have too many out of wedlock births, that automatically has an impact on the kind of birth rates and structure that you're talking about. So, that's one. And the second is, of course, on the workforce. And you spoke about this at length, about the change in the retirement age and so on. But China still has, I think, to my understanding, gender differentiated retirement ages. And so the women retire earlier than
yes,
men.
Sir. Women retirement age is 50 years.
So in that sense, do you see a movement in that direction, in perhaps getting more gender equality on the retirement age? Would that be one way of sort of expanding the working age population? And secondly, any comments that you may have on this reducing tendency for marriage within the Chinese system? Is there any structure that you see, any trends or any regional variations that you see in this particular area?
Thank you, sir. Actually, when I was preparing my presentation, I thought that whether I should discuss this gender issue or not. Then I thought maybe it will be too much social, but of course this cannot be this social. This is of course economic aspect as well. So yes, sir, very rightly you have pointed out this point related to gender and workforce. And yes, sir, the retirement age in China is different. It is different for male and different for female. And in female also, it is having the two sections, 50 years for the blue collar job and the 55-year for white collar job. So yes, when we talk about the gender equality in retirement age, so far we are not seeing this, because the kind of, as I mentioned, the kind of pilot projects, pilot policy, if we say, of delaying retirement, if we talk, they are not talking about the equalizing the retirement age. They are just very vaguely saying that retiree can delay his or her retirement by 1 year or some more year. So it is pretty obvious for male. In a current situation, for male it will be higher, like 62 year, but if we talk about the female, it will be like 50 to 57. So yes, the point is that in workforce retirement, in recent time, we do not see a kind of gender equality in terms of retirement age. But yes, in future, there might be a possibility that government think about it. But I have a little reservation on it, on this point as well, because when we talk about the gender ratio in China itself, of course, female number is very less. So how they are seeing, how government is seeing the contribution of female in workforce, whether they are focusing, because if we see the workforce composition, females are not at higher job. The number of female, as you see the so-called from transition from the blue collar job to white collar job, you will see the reduced number of female. So is this group of workforce, that means the women, they are really that much important? They have to think one thing, this one thing, if they need to think about this equality. Because when you will think about retirement age equality, when you will think about the equality of workforce, when you are not thinking, when you are not seeing male and females as a equal workforce, what this is my little reservation, that maybe this issue will get late attention from Chinese government. So this is the one point. And the second is reducing tendency of this late marriage, or if I'm right, this was the next question, the reducing tendency of marriages, what kind of pattern? See, yes, sir. In fact, it's a very long-term pattern. If we consider a decade, a long time period, it all started with this unique one-child policy of China. And of course, one-child policy means there was a section of China. Of course, there were some exceptions. I'm not going to deal and discuss that things. Just the general policy was that a couple can have one child. And of course, being an Asian society, there was the son preference. And even if not the son preference, we all know in China there is hukou system. So the point is that if you are registered in hukou, you will have all the state facilities. You are alive at state on paper. So the point is that many of the parents, they did that, they never registered their girl child. So this is how in Chinese population we have seen the invisible girl or the missing girl. This phenomena is there. So missing girl, or because of the son preference, whatever the factor, the main point is that we have very alarming gender ratio in China. And this is how we see the problem of bare branch. The point that you raised, that now more and more people, they are not getting married. There are two aspects. the two aspect means the one thing is that the gender male female ratio disparity. The another one is the economic affluences that we see in any country. When we have, this is the cycle of demography, that when you are getting economically advanced, the birth rate decrease because you are having better female participation in workforce, better economic living standards, so you prefer fewer birth rate. This is the economic aspect. But if we talk about the social aspect and the unique situation of China, it is totally created because it was the result of an implemented imposed policy. So yes, we have many very interesting terms like branch syndrome. That bear branch was reflecting the guys in China who are not getting the females to marry. This is the point. Then there is another point, gold miss phenomena, that I have just mentioned, that when you are having economic independence, maybe you do not prefer to have a partner. And sir, I would really again highlight this point that you have raised, that since China is still having most of the birth in the wedlock, they are not having many births out of the wedlock. So yes, this tendency, having fewer marriage or the indifference towards the marriage, whether it is intentional or unintentional, it is going to affect the birth rate in China. And this is the problem. And this is why government is trying to incentivize the births. Now government is trying to give incentive for the paid maternity leave in China, then child care, and then different funds for education and all that, because they are trying to give people this idea that yes, this is a good thing, it won't be a burden. But sir, this is a matter of discussion, because we have examples of South Korea, Japan, where we have this kind of incentive policy, but it did not work well, because demography transition is a process. When you peak, now you will decline. So this decline cannot be avoided. Yes, you can slow it down. So I hope I
I think Nirmal Panda had a similar question, or would you like to explore a different aspect?
while demography, can you focus on gender inequality?
You want to unmute and ask the question, or has she already? Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions at this point in time? Muskan?
No, sir, just the one.
Alka, would you like to ask something?
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Shachi. That was very interesting. And I must say that this linking of demography with the international, this is, I think, an area which needs to be worked on more.
Yes, sir.
Yes. It's quite clear that as we move towards a borderless world, even as flows are becoming easier and faster, there are other issues that are arising. And I think pressures from within create problems in two senses, because you may have a foreign policy which may not be very positively inclined towards, say, in approving or allowing migration. I mean, the Japanese, for instance, are fighting a losing battle here, and it's not very clear to me how are they going to get around this challenge of shrinking labor force. So this, what the question that comes to my mind is that how do you balance the security threats, perceived security threats? Because if you look at let's just forget the transatlantic migrations. We are now having a huge population surge across Asia and move into Africa. So the greater movements are going to be seen here. And if the West is putting up these barriers and making it increasingly difficult, then we are going to see more of transnational, transborder flows in and out of Asia.
Yes.
how do you see the kind of foreign policy challenges? I mean, you link it up with the kind of framework you have set out. But for instance, a country like China, would it be opening itself up to migrations from around? I mean, clearly they have problems with Xinjiang already. India has other kinds of problems. What I'm saying is that here we have a situation where the foreign policies are really not quite factoring in this impending demographic shifts which are going to take place in Asia.
Yes.
So how do you think that the Chinese are thinking about this, if at all they are thinking, because it appears they are?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. It's a very nice angle to this point, this whole discussion. Yes, ma'am, you have very rightly pointed out that all these demographic factors, or the demographic destiny, as I call, they are creating a kind of pressure from within, and that is creating that is pushing a different kind of scenario. And the kind of thing, the kind of the point that you have raised, the migration, whether China will allow it or not. So there are two aspects of it. When if we talk about the allow, so the point is that, as I said, we cannot avoid the demographic destiny. So the point is, maybe right now you are in a situation to not allow the international migration, but maybe after a while it will be your need. Like, for example, Japan was very strict, very particular about, until today in Japan, for example, in terms of marriage and family associations, if we see in Japan, they are very particular, they are very old school in that area. And they were, for some years back, they were very much clear about this international migration as well. But today it is need of Japan. Of course, the way they are tackling the amount is still, they are not ready. That is a different thing. But at some point, aging country will reach to a point where they cannot say no. They cannot say outrightly no, no, we will not allow the international migration. Now, the second aspect of this question, the point is that, yes, migration diplomacy can be the solution of this demographic challenge, but this solution will create more problem. As you said, the security issues. Because, for example, the country like China, huge and great surveillance and all that. But just the same situation, if we apply on India, we do not have that kind of system. And this kind of international migration might create some problem. So what I feel is, yes, international migration, to answer to this question, at one point, China will not be in a situation to say no to international migration. Of course, that time will come very late, after 1-2 decades. And the second point is that these kind of solutions, so-called solution, they will create a different kind of security issue. And we will discuss those kind of security dynamics, how to tackle these situations, how to make it more safer, how to make it more productive, how to save our nation and nationality. These kind of points will rise in future from this solution. So this is what I am getting, but of course this is very nice point, and I will work on it.
Yeah, and maybe we can just take this a little, extend this a bit further. Do you think that there is any scope for a platform, say pan-Asian platform, to discuss migration flows? Is there already one, or can, say, a country like China or India potentially take leadership in bringing together? Because I mean, we also have problems of migration, and it's a very substantial domestic issue in our country as well, when neighboring countries, for various reasons, start to flow in. So, what could potentially be the agenda for, let's say, a platform to for Asian countries to discuss migration?
What I feel that this kind of thing, the way, like in Cold War era, we see rise of the regional institutions, right? That was the need that was related to, identity, to safeguard themselves from the two so-called superpower, this and that. What I'm feeling that since you have put this point in my mind, what I feel we can have a new kind of regional platform or regional level development, like we today we are maybe in future in BRICS, in SARC, they are going to include this point as one of the very important agenda. So what I feel, this pan migration and to take leadership to maintain, because what will be the structure of this, because this will be the new phenomena, and each and every country, they are having their own unique migration problem. So what should be the solution? I think this will be a very broad topic and it will develop gradually. Even if India and China, they are trying to work, if they try to work, or some other country as well, they try to work, it will not be easy to have a very accepted to all solution. ऐसा solution होना थोड़ा सा मुश्किल है, क्योंकि migration is very unique when we talk about country to country. So this is what, but I think this can be a very good future trend of international politics and regional institution.
Yeah, so my final sort of, just to react to what you said, I think we have opened up potentially a very interesting space, because maybe historically now also we are looking at a paradigm shift, if you will, when migrations historically were push and pull factors, and individuals were really the ones who either went out or because they wanted better prospects for employment and so on, or that living conditions had become so difficult. Now it's a very different kind of requirement. And state-sponsored migration, I mean, is that something that can potentially become a very integral component of migration diplomacy, as you put it? I mean, that's, as I see it, it's a kind of a opening arena for investigations.
Yes, ma'am. I think this has a very good potential, because if we talk about China, like China is focusing on, of course, it's a different kind of angle, but China is also focusing on its overseas Chinese, and they are trying to stop the so-called brain drain. Because now you do not have that much population that you allow people to just go and settle down. Yes, go study and then come back and contribute to your country. So it is like bringing back to their own people. So if government is thinking about this and doing this indirectly, of course, state induced migration, that can be a solution of this problem in future as well, because that will be at least much more defined and structured, and it might create less problem.
All right, thank you. I think this very, very interesting ideas you have put on the table. Thank you so much, Hachi. It's a great, great pleasure to see you have. All right, yes, Partha.
Thank you, Alka. It was a nice digression into the exposition of the migration question. Pragroti, can I quickly sort of ask you to expand a bit more on one of the aspects that you sort of spoke about, which is obviously one of the implications of the slowdown in population is currently also being felt, is the slowdown in the economy. And therefore, you also mentioned that a larger proportion of resources would be needed for, and this is related to the dependency ratio in terms of taking care of elder care, right? So does this mean that in terms of a more slowly growing economy and a larger proportion of resources being used for these kinds of elder care, healthcare, kinds of issues, would that necessarily mean that the available budget for defense would therefore shrink? And would that in some sense then affect the international relations of China to some extent? And there is also a much more direct impact in the sense that as the number of young people reduce, the size, the physical, and this is also you mentioned the idea of investing in technology and so on and so forth. The physical size of the military would tend to sort of also possibly go down. So don't answer those questions now, because I see that Dr. Prithvi Kumar has asked a similar question. So let me ask him to unmute, and then sort of perhaps he can answer both those questions together. Dr. Prithvi Kumar? Muskan, could you just, go ahead.
Thank you so much for this fascinating discussion. My question is, because we're talking about international relations and demography linkage. So do you think aging demography can become a security issue in the months and years ahead? For example, in India, I already see that, for example, we have places where from where we could source manpower for our military, right? But now, though the demography in that area is artificially is changed through various kind of crimes and all that. So I think aging demography for the nation states is going to become a huge security issues in the days to come. And the IR theorists, they should also incorporate this aspect when they theorize about international relations in the months and years ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead, Dr. Garnered.
Yeah. It is a very interesting take that whether aging can be a security issue. So as I said, and if you remember my last slide, there was a demographic bomb, the picture of demographic bomb. So this is why demography is called a bomb. If you are not going to tackle it with wisdom, and if you are not ready for it, if you are not making enough arrangement for it, it is going to blast your country. But if you are going to use demographic reality in a well structured manner, it can benefit you. So now answer to this question, that can aging be a security issue in future? No, it won't be an security issue in future, because most of the country which are stepping into this aging arena, they are aware of these things, and they are trying to tackle this situation, and they are trying to have solutions for these things. For example, like shrinking military, if we talk about, yes, we will have fewer number of people, but we will have much more skilled and technologically advanced people in military. In a similar way, if we talk about, I'm going to the Dr. Mukhopadhyay's comment on this, that yes, if we are going to invest all the most of the economic resources on the elderly care, whether it is going to put some negative impact on security budget or defense budget as we call. So yes, there are some prediction. For example, in China, since it is predicted that by 2030, 20% of the GDP of China, that will be on social welfare, and which is a good amount of money, because many of the EU country, they are having 16-17% of the point. So yes, this point is not like this point is very much valid, but the thing is that it is not that much greater threat because we are getting ready. We are gearing up for an aging future. And this is why I'm saying if a country is not going to tackle this aging reality, if a country is not going to understand and embrace its demographic destiny, then that country will be in a tight spot. Otherwise, the decreasing number and the technology, this kind of ratio, this is going to help in elderly care as well. If we take example of American elderly care or European elderly care, a lot of technology is involved in that elderly care. Of course, elderly care is a field jahan pe we cannot rely 100% on technology. We need some manpower, some human power. But of course, technology will ease this burden. So yes, if we are going to invest more on how to tackle this problem of fewer people, it is not only going to help in our security field, it is also going to help in our social field, it is also going to help in our economic field. So the need is to understand the problem, where is the problem and where we exactly have to pinpoint that thing. So this is what my understanding is.
Thank you. If there are any further questions, Shanky, Prisya, anyone would like to ask before? No raised hands? Okay. So, thank you so much, Dr. Agnihotri. This has been quite an interesting discussion and building linkages across areas where we don't ordinarily see the connections. And we're looking forward to see how this particular aspect is developed further in your research, and look forward to more younger. I hope this particular aspect inspires more younger scholars to explore these dimensions further. So thank you so much. With those words, let me hand it back to Muskan. But before I do that, is there any final thoughts you'd like to share, Dr. Agnihotri?
No, it was wonderful experience, and I'm really very thankful to Professor Acharya. And thank you, sir. It was really very delight. I was so happy when I saw that you are chairing my session. So, thank you.
It's a pleasure. Look forward to this stuff, and you with your education in China would obviously have a much more almost a ringside view of these developments, and we look forward to see how you can expand this further. So, Muskan, the screen is all yours.
And thank you, the whole ICS team. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir, as you've given the permission to formally bring an end to today's session. With this, we would wrap up the session, and we thank Dr. Sachi Agnihotri and Dr. Partha Mukhopadhyay for giving us their precious time. The video of today's discussion will be available on the ICS YouTube platform. We would like to welcome everyone for the next Wednesday seminar titled Democracy and Socialism, a Perspective from China. Information related to the same will be available on the ICS website, or you could also subscribe to our newsletters for regular updates. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.